Hello and welcome to the Promised Land. It is Kobbie Mania. As Rob, did you use that yesterday? Was that you? Because I was thinking the same thing.
Were you thinking Kobbie Mania? I was thinking.
Yeah, I
don't
actually
know.
was, and I did. That was before I saw what you tweeted this morning.
I had Hulk Hogan in my head going, Kobbie Mania is running wild on you, and my God, I was taking my vitamins. So like, I looked at that last night, and I tweeted that, and it was an emotional response. It felt like not like Kobbie's arrived. Like he's been arriving for a while, hasn't he? But my God, he's the center of everything that's good at Manchester United.
In wrestling spiel, do you remember the old WrestleMania theme tune? Whoa, whoa, Kobbie Mania. There you go. I actually just sang on a podcast. Sorry, everyone.
I think we should have more singing on the podcast, especially in the first minute of a show, Scott. I mean, we're talking about like going for it from the start. I think this is a new thing. Yeah, we'll get a wrestling theme tune and we'll make it work towards how Man United are playing. And I'm sure it'll be very up and down every week.
Yeah, this is the Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. Scott and Rob back as usual. Subscribe, please, wherever you get your podcasts, and watch us on YouTube as well. The Promised Land and Man United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, etc., etc. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a show. And Apple and Spotify, etc., the places you can find us on audio platforms. Social media is where we are also at as well, at _ Scott Saunders on X, IG, TikTok, at _Rob_B on X and YouTube, at TPL MUFC on X as well, or Twitter as it's formerly known. Today, we have seen some of your comments. You're too negative. You're so negative. Stop being negative. Well, no. Today, there are things that we could pick out in that United performance. How you let go a 2-0 and a 3-1 lead with some silly decisions. But you know, the positive is that you took 3 points. Your latest academy graduate pops up with the most composed piece of play, typical of him. It's so typical in a moment where the game essentially descends into chaos because everybody's just lost their heads, including the people who are watching. So playing in it is, I don't know what people must be thinking, but then he just gets the ball. Nutmegs Max Kilman, opens up in front of him. It all seemed to just happen in slow motion. And then he just slots it far corner and just runs off. Bit of calmer, I think there was. Bit of a finger wagging or whatever. Kobbie Mania. He's not supposed to do that. He's supposed to just sit deep in midfield and be like, yeah, chilling.
But do you know what, Scott? That's exactly what he's supposed to do. Like, this is the Kobbie we've spoken about for a while, about player that is multi-talented, that can do all sorts of stuff around the opposition box. But yet, of course, he's been introduced to Man United as a number 6, hasn't he? So we think defensive function. And he does all of that as well. He is a modern central midfielder that can do both. He's a proper box-to-box. It's just nice, Scott, that he's playing in the 8. Funnily enough, obviously, towards the end of the game, he's playing as the 6. But he's going like good footballers do. I don't have to stay in that position. I have to go help my team now because we've made a big mess of this. It's now 3-3, and I've got to try and penetrate into that space. So I think the thing is with Kobbie, Scott, is that this is all about untapped potential. And I think that this is showing Ten Hag in real time what he maybe should be doing with some of the midfield, because there's no doubt that Manu can facilitate this stuff week after week after week. Like, he is the calmest guy on a football pitch, isn't he? You know, it doesn't matter what his age is.
He plays like he's 28.
It literally plays like he's been playing football for 30 years.
I'll say 38.
There's been a lot of kind of like, I've seen a few people
in a good way. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
I've seen a lot of people compare him to Clarence Seedorf, and like in my head a week or two ago, I was thinking very similar thing, like the Stockport Seedorf thing. That was like, you know, it's kind of what he is and what he can become. There's no doubt that I think is his level. Like, that's a world-class level, and I think that he can achieve that at Manchester United, and that's what you have to build on. So when things are going wrong, Scott, and things are burning, and like bad things are still happening, that's what you have to grab hold of, isn't it? So, like you said, Scott, some of our viewers were like, oh, you're all negative, Rob, Scott, too negative. Well, we're going to be positive today, because even though we saw some not so good things yesterday against Wolves, we did see plenty of stuff we can talk about that was wholly positive.
Where should we start? Let's let's do a bit more Kobbie, because, the fact that you can go and pull that off when, well, let me say this, right? We would have seen Kobbie Mainoo play a lot, probably since from the start of the season, really,
Mm.
if he didn't get injured against Real Madrid in preseason.
Mhm.
In that game, he played alongside Casemiro in midfield, and Casemiro, I think it was his tackle that led to somebody falling over, and then that fell into Kobbie, and then he had an injury which he was out for a few months with. I think we've criticized Casemiro. I think Casemiro's come in for criticism for the duration of the season. But obviously he was sitting in that role, Rob, wasn't he, where he was essentially a lone six, and Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes would press on the very top line and then easily be beaten. And then Casemiro doesn't really, he's never been quick anyway, has he? But yesterday, I think United with Casemiro and Mainoo in there looked, let's say for the first 60 minutes, Casemiro got booked after 2, but we'll toss that aside. For 60 odd minutes, it looked like they fully were in control of that. And it seemed like those two might be the go-tos for me anyway, moving forward.
Yeah, like your pickings are slim, aren't they? I think you're seeing with Casemiro that the deficiencies are still there. Like, he gets booked in the second minute for diving in. Again, we've done that show 35 times. It feels like, like, don't dive in, Casemiro. You don't need to, because you're compromising the game. But what you did see with Casemiro, of course, also is all his know-how. So he did intercept play quite often in the 6. He got United going. He got them on the front foot. And he's doing that more functional number 6 work. Is he still going to get run, Scott, week after week by midfields that work that out quite early? Yes, he is. So that's something you have to work towards. But there's no doubt that Casemiro and Manu, being maybe the hub of your midfield, is more functional and works more. Do you know what I mean? Oh, balloons going up there on our screen.
If you're listening on audio, Rob just had some balloons on his screen.
I don't know. Like, I put my hand up, to gestate or something. I think it's a
Can we
stream.
turn this off? I'm not sure.
Oh, look, there we go. Look,
oh, there you go.
You
You had a thumbs up as well. Thumbs up for Kobbie.
Strange AI world
Anyway,
that we live in.
Sorry, go on.
But I think the whole thing is that you have to move away from Casemiro eventually, of course. But at the moment, there's no doubt that he's your best option as a 6. Like, if you want to do other things on a football pitch, I actually think, Scott, it's not a criticism of Bruno Fernandes, not a direct one. But if you're going to play 4-1-4-1, and we're now saying, this is how I feel, Kobbie is your one of your 8s. He's got to be one of your 8s. You've got no choice now. He's just too good. Is that if the other number 8 is Bruno Fernandes, then Bruno's going to have to do defensive work that probably hurts you as well. And you saw that yesterday, is that Bruno, when he's in and around the box, still just can't do a lot of the functional defensive work. He's not a defensive player. He can run around. He's got all the effort in the world, everything you want from a player to kind of put his heart on the line, but he just can't do some of that function. Bruno is better up the pitch. If he's in the 10 or higher up near a striker, Bruno's good. That's where you want Bruno. So I think this is something for Ten Hag to work out in the week's ahead, because it's going to be 4-1-4-1 now, isn't it? I think for the rest of the season, he's not going to do anything else. That's his default system now. And I think that Kobbie and Casemiro has to start in the midfield when they're fit. And it's just as simple as that.
Just, I suppose there's a word for, Ten Hag's been criticised by everybody for poor results and performances this season, and rightly so. But there's always that underlying consideration that, hey, my entire team's injured. And what we saw yesterday, Andre Onana's, been playing. We'll talk about him a bit later. But then you've got Rafa Varane. Seems like all those issues of him being dropped are just behind him. And now he's reunited with Lisandro Martinez, who I've said so many times, United miss him so much. They really do. They miss the tenacity. They miss the precision that he has on the ball. They miss the aggression that he has. They miss his defensive capabilities. They miss his calmness in possession. Next to Luke Shaw, who, there's always this debate about, is he world class, etc., etc. But then you put that back four back together, and whether you interchange Wan-Bissaka for Dallo, I mean, that's personal preference, I think. But you put Shaw in there, and then we just talked about the midfield. Shaw overlaps Marcus Rashford, who's been having a bad season. Luke Shaw, I think, has only played 12, 13 games and not really been that fit. He's not been able to get any rhythm to him. And then one of the goals comes about from Luke Shaw overlapping Rashford, and he actually passed it to Rasmus Hojlund, which is crazy. The right side is, I think Garnacho deserves his spot there. I wouldn't really change that. But yeah, what my point is, Ten Hag actually has players that he are not square pegs in round holes for once. And I think it resulted for me in 60 minutes of some really decent stuff that you want to start to build on.
Completely, and I think the biggest positive out of the game yesterday, more than even Manu's brilliant moment at the end, is that you played with poise and focus for the vast majority of the game. And the two players you've mentioned there are the two that I want to highlight as well. Is I think with Luke Shaw, it's all about how you conduct yourself, Scott. Like, players can make mistakes. Martinez can make a mistake. Luke Shaw can make a mistake. It's just about what your function is. Like you just said there, Luke Shaw overlapping Rashford is always going to give Rashford more time on the ball in the correct area. And it also gives you an extra threat on the final ball going into the box from Luke Shaw. And we know Luke Shaw's really good at that. Martinez being the first player that the ball goes to out from Onana gives you much more control going into the midfield. United have missed that all season long, haven't they? Because these two players are your fundamental ball progressors in your team. So it's good for Ten Hag because I think that he can play the system and the style of football that he wants to play a little bit more. You still nearly made a mess of it because you got to 3-3 in a game where really you should have been 5-0 up at half time. Like you could have won this game really early on, and that's something I think United need to learn. But there was certainly, I think, more positives and negatives. And from the bench side as well, Scott, I've criticised Eric Ten Hag. And people have said to me, oh, you've got an agenda against Eric Ten Hag. It's turning. We can smell it. This is like when Jose was at the football club and you turned on him and all this. And it's like, no, you're just trying to call the tactics, trying to call what we're seeing and saying whether it's good or bad. And I think some of the stuff from the sideline in the last few weeks and months has not been good. Some of the tactics have been a little bit regressive, I think. But when everyone is fit, Scott, you can probably do your preferred system of 4-1-4-1. If you've got Casemiro plugging the hole in the six, you've got a centre back that can bring the ball out. You've got a fullback that can overlap and get forward and become a kind of winger out there to help Rashford. All these things will feel better. You just mentioned Garnacho. Garnacho now to get in the team probably won't start on the left. He'll start on the right. He's already shown in a very short body of work he can do that. He can do that work because he can be left side, right side. He's multifunctional. I actually think on the right, he's much more functional than Antony. Like Antony come on last night and
do you know what? Obviously, maybe we'll talk about Antony later. He didn't cover himself in glory, but I find it quite interesting that he played left and Garnacho stayed on the right.
Yeah, because I think you're going to have to say to Garnacho, your job now is there. That's where you start in this team. And of course, there's going to be times where you switch wings with the wingers. That's normal. But I think overall is that Garnacho as a right footer gives you better balance there. Now, that falls away from Ten Hag's normal MO of having inverted players. So Garnacho, I don't know if you noticed, Scott, quite often when he comes back for the ball now on either the left or the right, he starts to invert a lot more. So he gets the ball. So he's clearly been told this, go into midfield, make the up at the extra man, and then you can pop the ball out. And I like that because it shows he's learning. He doesn't just stand on the wing like Rashford tends to. Rashford will stand there until something happens on him. He'll be out wide. But then that's what Rashford does because he's got this straight line speed. Garnacho, I think, is more of a footballer and gets involved. And I think that's the only way you can go forward is with him being as your first choice right-sided player, which begs a big question about a guy that you paid 80 million for who isn't going to start games now going forward because he doesn't warrant it, And Garnacho is better on that side. There's no doubt about it for me.
Obviously, transfer policy and transfers in general should be called into question. Obviously, we're days-ish away from Ineos's investment being ratified, you'd think, and at some point in the near future, transfer errors might be reviewed and potentially reversed. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about Onana in a little bit. Antony falls into that category as well.
Mm,
Mason Mount's. You could have picked Mason Mount for free in 4 months,
mm.
if 5 months, if you'd let him run his contract down rather than spending 60 million. He's barely played anyway because he's been injured. But you know, at least now we can concentrate on improving things on the pitch. And I don't want to get into negative territory. We will do a little bit. We'll call out where United need to improve, maybe towards the end of the show. We'll also do a bit of why United. And we was asked by a listener, why have Man United offloaded so many youth products this month? Youth, United hate youth, even though Kobbie Mainoo took over the game last night and scored, probably one of the goals of the month, goals of the season. Just in the circumstances that it was. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Now, let's just focus a little bit more on the style aspect, Rob, because obviously results are the be all and end all. But obviously, when you're United and you're out Ten Hag and you play Real Madrid off the pitch at the Bernabeu with Ajax, people come in expecting some kind of style to be implemented. And there's arguments that United have not had a style for 18 months. Do you think there is one there? Do you think the absence of personnel has affected it?
The absence of personnel can only affect it. Like, if you don't have your best players in your team, whichever team you are, even if you're Man City or Liverpool doing well, as soon as you lose your best players, if you lose them all, like United lost, I think like 12 or 13 players that you could say would be starters in many different football matches, then of course it's going to hurt you. So this is why it always becomes a little bit of a null and void point, is that we talk about flair, function, or tactics. And the caveat always underneath it is that, yeah, if you haven't got your best players, then you're not going to be as good. That's like normal. It's nothing to kind of write home about. I think what we're looking at, Scott, here is purpose. Yeah, so I think that United yesterday, the most important part of the whole game, besides winning it 4-3, is that they played with purpose. Yeah, in what they were doing, in their coverage, in the way they were linking together. And it's that element of fast, slow that we talk about. So like in games, there are times where you have to slow it down, and that's fine, and take 10 minutes on the ball. And there are times that for 5-10 minutes, you have to speed it up because there are opportunities at the other end. Think, when United scored early on, the first thing in my head was like, right, don't concede a goal now, because that's what you do every time. You score and then you concede. And that didn't really happen yesterday, even though United did concede 3 goals. But it wasn't this immediate reaction to scoring a goal and just switching off. And we've seen that so often at United, is that they score and then they go to sleep for 5 minutes and concede. And that hurts you more than you can ever say mentally up here, because it really, really affects you. It's stressful. And I think yesterday they controlled those parts of the game. They still somehow got to the end of the match, and it was 3-3 in deep in the 90 minutes. And we can kind of put a cap on that later. So that's something to learn from, isn't it? But now you've got your better players back. We should expect to see higher standards. We should expect to see tactics executed in a more kind of erudite way. So I feel good about that. Like, I think you've got these players coming back, and it means that you should be able to do other things. But you've now got to carry on that control and purpose, Scott, because I think you went there, and if you just do normal stuff in the final third, like you win this game at half time, don't you? It's over at 3 or 4-0. And you go and have a second half where you can just swan around with the ball a little bit. And that's something United need to get towards. They're working towards that. You just mentioned Ten Hag there in the Bernabeu. We're never going to be Ajax. Like, we're never, ever going to play that style of football. So people need to stop thinking like that. He needs to find a way in the Premier League to do all the flair and the function and the control. And yesterday, I think there are breadcrumbs there to show that this manager can do it. And this goes back to what we've said, I think, in months gone by, is that you have to judge him when he's got all the cards on the table. So here we are now. You've got your best team. There are no excuses. You have to go forward with this. We have to get better performances, and we have to get wins.
This is why, for me, the sacking mid-season debate is just pointless. Like, really, I mean, I understand the magnitude of United and how every result you could be you're one loss away from a crisis, like almost all the time. But you're saying another manager comes in and magically makes maybe it happens. But look at Roberto De Zerbi, right? Who everyone wanted 3
You love
months ago,
him.
has won 3 matches in 16 in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Has anybody noticed?
No, because
No.
Brighton, no one cares about Brighton.
It's Brighton.
You know.
Nobody's noticed. If
You know.
if he wins 3 matches in 16 at United, he's gone.
Oh, yeah.
Or everyone's calling him a fraud.
Exactly. And like, again, these things are not like...
He just lost 4-0 at Luton.
Yeah, it's not that they're not valid, and I don't think that if you brought a new manager in that you there's any magic. Like, that's not... It's still a piece of work. You have to work from the start, don't you, with the players that you got and building into new transfer windows. I do think that like yesterday, if you draw that game 3-3, it's going to feel like a defeat, both to the players and to all of us. And this show is very, very different. Like, Kobbie Mainoo really did save the bacon yesterday for Manchester United. He really, really did, with that moment that we can all celebrate and feel good about. You know, we opened the show with Kobbie Mania. You know, thank you, Kobbie. You know, praying emoji, because without him yesterday, you are talking about something completely different here. And this will be Ten Hag with his first team. Yeah, so this is a body of work. The manager has to improve things 1% at a time. But it's timing, Scott, as well, is that you haven't really got a lot of time to prove yourself. And that's football in a nutshell. Like you just said about De Zerbi, you know, we're talking about next Liverpool managers and things like that. De Zerbi is on that list. But yeah, like, he hasn't, you know, his winning record recently in this season's not been fantastic. I think Brighton are one of the few teams that have got as bad a goal difference as Man United this season, in the middle of the table. But for Ten Hag, he has to get results. Forget all the noise, close it all down in-house, and get results. Get your players like Marcus Rashford back into the game here. Get him scoring goals. Get him contributing at the right end of the football pitch, and things should be better. And I think that the team we saw yesterday, Scott, is probably the 11 that will start most games now going forward. Like,
Yeah,
everyone's
I think
fit.
so.
I think Mason Mount is an option somewhere in the wider areas, or if you want to bring him in and try something a little bit different at number 8. Like I said, though, I still don't think Bruno is an optimal number 8 for this system, a 4-1-4-1. If you go back to 4-2-3-1 or something like that, Kobbie definitely can sit deeper in the double pivot, and it means that Bruno can be a 10. But then you've got Mount, and you haven't got a lot else. Like, you look around the team, you have trimmed out the players that you were looking at, the Hannibals, the Palestris. These players are now out of your squad and not available. So you're going to have to just do it a certain way, aren't you? And I think when you've got everyone fit, that's not a difficult call for Ten Hag. So I don't think we're going to be saying to him every week, "All right, you're going to make some dramatic changes," because he's going to play this system in this team pretty much against every team he plays now going forward towards the end of the season.
There's also obviously absences and the fact that they played a game every 3 days. And I know other clubs are in the same situation. But when you're trying to revamp a culture on top of all this, you know, nobody ever said that this United job would be an easy fix. You look at like clubs like Tottenham and then think, oh, Ange can turn it around in 5 minutes. He doesn't have half the problems there. That I know they came from a bad situation, but this ship takes a hell of a lot more to turn around. Like, there's so many extra. I'm even getting a thumbs up. Like, the StreamYard must have loved that. You know, I think Ten Hag should have, as long as he doesn't lose 10 in a row, as long as he isn't 15th in a relegation battle. For me, you see out the season with him. But now, and I've said this many times, now it's a testing ground. Now everybody has got to prove themselves, including Ten Hag. I think, how much blame do you put on? No, we'll come to the negative section after. You know, at least we saw 60 minutes of, I think, what Erik Ten Hag wants yesterday. And there's plenty of positives to take. Like I say, we'll come on to the other stuff. But in terms of one of the big criticisms that we've had is nobody passes to Rasmus Hojlund. Now, do you think there's some kind of budding relationship there starting to build? Because obviously he got the assist for Rashford. I know that was a bit of a tip off when he was under pressure. Lovely finish from Rashford, by the way. We'll skip over all that stuff. The conversation's moved on. But good of Rashford to respond in that way, scoring after 4 minutes. I thought he played okay. One of his better performances. But I think Luke Shaw passing for Hojlund to score a striker's goal, because he made that run. He made the run to the near post. And usually it's, no, I'm not going to bother. Now I'll try and I'll delay it or I'll cut it back to somebody who isn't there. And then you've got like it seems like a natural striker who's in there to score goals. Like it was a scrappy goal. But that you got to score those. You have to score those.
You've got to score those. You want 10 of those a season. Like that is exactly what you want a 9 to do. I don't know if you saw Scott Hojlund's interview after he was given man of the match in him, which again I think was debatable. Like he got the man of the match award, but I think that's a pat on the back for a good performance. He said outwardly, he was like, I've said to my teammates, if you don't pass me the ball in those areas, then I'm gonna like come after you. But at the same time, if you do pass it to me and I miss the chance, then you're allowed to come after me. And that's good because it's like self-governance. That's what you want teams to do. You want them to have that communication line. And like, yeah, if Rasmus has chances but misses them, then all you can do is create the chance for him, can't you? That's what you do for your number 9. And at the same time, Hojlund's dual function is to control some part of the press higher up the pitch. And I think he does all of that. Like, again, for a young lad, I think he's pretty consistent in a lot of that work. He doesn't really clock on and off. He's good at that stuff. So I loved that goal, Scott, even though, you see, he scores the goal, doesn't he? Flicks it in the net at the near post and he's like celebrating on his face. Like he's like, and you know what? He's a Man United fan. He's feeling like all of us in that moment. I know he's scoring the goal and earning the money and wearing the shirt, but he's a fan. He's feeling that. He knows what it means. That's a positive. So
He's been starved of chances and goals really as well. So you can't blame him.
He's got one of the lowest XA to XGs in the league of being supplied the ball in the whole Premier League as a number 9. I think he's pretty much bottom. United have not passed him the ball in optimum areas compared to other strikers. I was digging through the stats the other day, and when you compare it to say like Salah at Liverpool or obviously Haaland, is that they all get chances created for them in good areas of the football pitch. And they're also brilliant on their own. They can do, their own stuff. Salah can beat people off the dribble and everything. Haaland can physically outwork you in the penalty box. But the whole thing is, Scott, is that they get the chances from their teammates. And that we can talk about our creative players, and we've done it a lot in the past. Unless you get the ball to the striker somewhere around the penalty spot or in the 6-yard box, you are not helping them. Not enough. And this has been the criticism maybe from me in the past of, say, Bruno Fernandes, is that Bruno's got great metrics for assists and goals and all of those things, but we need to see him more in the 10, closer to the striker to help the striker or higher up the pitch. So that's the problem also, Bruno being in the 8. He's not close enough to the striker. He's trying to do Hollywood passes. So I think it's positive because it shows that United are learning with this striker on the fly what they need to do. But I'm going to give Rashford his due here because I think Rashford really helped Hojlund yesterday and Garnacho as well. The front three have definitely coming to a better understanding of where they're supposed to be on a football pitch when the ball's at their feet. And Luke Shaw overlapping is the kind of cherry on the cake, because once you're in that channel, Scott, it means the forwards can get in the box and be in better positions. So this is it now. Like, you have to carry on running with this, don't you? You've got a striker. You haven't got any other strikers. Like, he's going to be the number 9 by hell of a high water. It doesn't matter. You haven't got any other options. And I think as long as Rashford can carry on maybe what he did yesterday, and I think he has done that in previous games as well, his form is better. I think he's getting goals and assists again. Then let's keep everything to the on-pitch function. That's what we can talk about. And it was better. As you get to half time and you expect to be 5 or 6-0 up because you create all these chances, the next step, Scott, is actually scoring the goals. Get the goals, go and hammer a team now. Whoever you go play in the future, create all these chances in 20 or 30 minutes, but you've got to start taking them now.
Well, they should have last night. I mean, Bruno Fernandes had a massive chance, which was blocked. Hojlund had a chance from about 6 yards, which was saved. 2 offside goals. So I'm actually encouraging set piece planning from Bruno and Casemiro, wasn't it? I think Casemiro should have. There was one chance in particular he should have scored. But yeah, I mean, when you're in that situation, you're 2-0 up, and there were moments where United were just like they wouldn't take their foot off the throat, essentially, to say it that way. But then they were making the chances, but just not taking them. And you can't afford it because really, you can run through a game and absolutely dominate it, and then you can get the world's worst officiating decision. And all of a sudden the game's flipped on its head. And we know how United deal with changes in momentum in matches, let's say. Do you want to do any penalty?
Oh, it's not a foul for me. First and foremost, I think that the contact in technical terms is incidental. So he might have brushed him, but I think the player accentuates it. And that's basically what simulation is in the book. I think he simulates the foul and he wins the foul. The referee gives it. So it's really hard then for VAR to find an angle which proves that he was clear and obviously wrong. But he was clear and obviously wrong. It's like it's not a penalty. It's really not a penalty. And the referee, if he gives that, Scott, is guessing. Like he's near enough to it, but he's sold down the river. And this is kind of why we called for VAR for many years, is that you can then run back a replay. What I don't understand, Scott, is why is it that the referee, you can't advise the referee and say, well, that's a 50-50, go to the monitor and look at it. Because in the 2 or 3 minutes that he stood there telling all the players they're doing a video review, like there is a screen within 20 yards of you. Go and look at the screen. I actually think if he sees that in slow motion, he rescinds it. Goes, actually, there's nothing in that, is there? There's just hardly touched him. And if he has touched him, it's certainly not enough to constitute a foul. So, and that did change some of the flow of the game, didn't it? I think when that happened, I was still quite happy, Scott, that after that, United did get back on the horse. Like in previous matches, 2-1 is a really dangerous scoreline for Man United because you think they're going to lose their mind. And in previous weeks and months, that has happened where they've not been able to handle it. Still didn't completely handle it fantastically, but they did seem to have, again, more purpose about their work. They knew they had to go and carry on and try and win the football match. They did. Scott McTominay comes on, heads the ball into the ground, goes into the roof of the net. That's your job. Well done. And United carried on doing, I think, the good stuff that they did in the first half deeper into the football match.
Yeah, but obviously, somehow, well, right. Not spoiler. Notice this is the negative section. We're gonna try and box
Don't
it in.
switch off.
Sub 10 minutes. Just don't switch off. Like we said about like don't concede after half time.
Yes,
they managed not to, like straight after half time. Like the way that Wolves broke out and what led to the penalty, bit naive. I think it's not a penalty for me, but it's a crazy decision. You go ahead again, you go back down the other end. Scott McTominay nods it in. Seemed to have learned from his missed chance in the final minute against Spurs the other week, where he didn't head the ball into the ground. They went over the bar. But then what happened in this period between McTominay's goal and Kobbie Mainoo's goal? Because like we said earlier on, transfer policy and transfer decisions, there's questions. Like I was prepared to give Onana a chance, as we should with all players, but it's just he's not doing it for me, really. I think this one needs to be. And what can you do? Can you actually sell him? Is that even possible? He just got ousted for Cameroon by a third division French league keeper at AFCON. He's come back. I mean, and then the second goal, sorry, which he's just a little bit soft in. And then Pedro Neto's goal, we'll talk about the corner in a minute, but it's not in the corner, So I look at that and I think that's going to continue costing United in certain moments. I'm not putting the blame firmly on him, but it's just not. My point is, it's just not very convincing at the moment, is it?
No, I think you're being polite. Like, it's not a case of whether it's convincing or not. I'm one of these people that definitely want players to be given chances, and you make mistakes and you learn from them. There's no doubt, I think, that watching every second of Onana play for Manchester United, he's not really learning. He's not really. He had a spell for about 5 or 6 games where he improved in the Premier League, going back in like months ago. But you can see, Scott, that again, in a lot of his function, that if he makes one mistake, you bet he's going to make 4. And that's a bad look on a goalkeeper. Like, he's not a double down goalkeeper. It's not like I make a mistake and then like, all right, I pick myself up. I think De Gea was a bit more like that. De Gea was a little bit more like, if he made a mistake, then he would kind of correct himself and go back to basics and, just try and keep the ball out of the net with any way that he can. I'm not trying to make that comparison to be like deliberately, I don't know, like leaning on a fan base there. But I think when you look at this and you go forward with the goalkeeper, it kind of feels not viable. Like, if you want to win, you've got to have a set of winners somewhere across the line. Your goalkeeper is one position where you need that elite mentality. And that's what I question with Onana. And I think yesterday, you just mentioned a few moments there. For me, it's the Kilman goal in the sense that that is a good chance for Kilman. It's point blank. It's right in front of you. And all you have to do is have your hands up here and you save it. And that's it. It's not rocket science. It's like goalkeeping 101. If your hands are out here or down here, you're in the wrong position at point blank save there. And it hits him. Does it hit him like in the shoulder? You know, there was 2 or 3 times yesterday where the ball hits him in the face and in the shoulder, and you're like, your hands are nowhere near the ball. That's a problem. So, like, your goalkeeper coach, you're looking at that and you're saying, well, why is that? But we see that from him. That's part of his style of goalkeeping. And what does it do, Scott? It fills you with fear. You watch it and you think, oh, hang on, my goalkeeper can't do the real basics. So he was bought as a sweeper keeper. That's still not quite working. That might take some time. Erik ten Hag will stick with him because he is Erik ten Hag signing. But I think if you did have a new manager tomorrow, one of the things straight away a new manager would be looking at is going, well, maybe those 3 signings we talked about there, Onana, Antony, and I think Mason Mount to a level, is who actually survives any future coal going into a new season, because none of them have really helped you. If anything, they've been detrimental. And I think for Onana, like, the jury is out. It really is. It does feel a little bit like, you know, the Claudio Bravo situation at Man City, where you sign someone to do something, they can't do it, and at the end of the season you go, we tried it, we move on. And I think Manchester United might be doing that. Maybe they'll
well, the difference is Claudio Bravo didn't cost 50 odd million. So
and that is the problem. Like those 3 players I just mentioned there, Scott, 200 million in transfer fees. 200 million, and that's not even talking about their wages. So that is a lot of money. Like, again, we talked what Ineos want to do and how Ineos want to kind of do this project, and they're going to be looking at like cutting the wage bill and making money back on transfer so they can reinvest. You look at those 3 players, and I think you look at Onana, I think you could move forward more successfully with a young goalkeeper, which is what I wanted with De Gea. Like, when De Gea was
Tottenham have shown it. Like, Vicario is, you know, he probably, if he hadn't moved to Tottenham, he'd have probably joined Inter.
But you got to remember when City bought Ederson, when Liverpool were Alisson, I know they're always the examples. They were not established names. They weren't like, you weren't bringing in goalkeepers that you go, oh, they're going to win you stuff. Now, they did win them stuff because they proved themselves, but they're being brought in as development, you know, to be able to go win your football match in the future. I think you look at Onana, and it was always this feeling that you were buying this ready-made sweeper keeper. I think we used the words on the show when we signed him that he's the best sweeper keeper in the world. Maybe we were getting a little bit too excited there. But he has abilities that we've not seen yet, because United still can't really play out from the back, even though that is going to improve, I think, with Martinez there and with Luke Shaw there. But this goalkeeper's got to get his hands up. And he's got to work out in the Premier League that that's a lot of the job. A lot of the job, point blank, is to make that one save a game. And the rest of it then comes. And you know, I think that the Neto goal, he leaves way too much open that side. He just says to Neto, shoot on that side and you're going to score. And he does. And you're again looking at something that's not technically a goalkeeping error. There's definitely a bad passage of play from someone that's struggling. And he's come back from AFCON, Scott. He got dropped for a 3rd-tier goalkeeper from the French league. Like, that's not a good look, is it? Like, if Cameroon believed that about him, then what are we doing at United? Is it really maybe a time to give Bandir a little bit of a chance? There's no way Ten Hag does that, but that might be the kind of logical thing to do in the weeks ahead if Onana can't improve his performances.
Just one more negative point. What the hell are they doing on that corner? Like, who do we look at here? Ten Hag makes changes. He brings on Harry Maguire. He brings on Johnny Evans.
Yeah.
He sacrifices attackers, midfielders to see out the game. And then you throw all of them forward on a corner when you're like in injury time and you don't need to. You don't need to score again. Just don't be silly. And then so many players forward. The ball falls to Antony. He does Antony stuff, loses the ball, and Wolves are away. And then that leads to wherever we just described with the Neto shot and Onana essentially just letting it past him. Whose fault is that?
It's the manager's fault. It's the manager's fault. Are you not telling me that in that moment that they are not putting instructions from the coaching staff to the players? That's how that last 5 minutes of a game works. And like you just said there, he made all the outward changes. And this is why this is not an agenda. Sorry, I know people don't think I'm having a go at Ten Hag.
I disagree with you personally.
I think in that moment, when there's minutes to go, he's shown in bringing on Johnny Evans, Harry Maguire, what he's doing, he's closing the game down. It's the right thing to do. I want to see more of that when you're in the lead. If you're 1 goal up with 10 minutes to go, start to close the game down. You don't need to go win it and by scoring another goal. I think in that moment, Scott, like you saying that you see it differently, that communication from the coaching area to the players has to be absolutely rigid. And that is, you get the ball in the corner flags, you don't cross the ball into the box, Bruno. Centre backs, you don't need to go forward. You don't need to go win the game again in the 90x amount of minutes. You need to make sure that the counter attack's not on. That is a coaching decision. It is. When his players are running forward, do you know what he can do, Scott? He can stand there and show us and go, no, get back. You see Jose do that all the time. Funnily enough, talking about Mourinho for the second time today. Jose would do it all the time. He'd be like, get back. Don't you dare go forward. Ten Hag wasn't. He was just kind of stood there, and then Bruno goes and takes a corner, and I'm like thinking, like you just thought there, it's like, why are you swinging it in the box? It's like mad, because if they head it out, and then you've got Varane back there, guess what? Varane's going to get outrun, isn't he? And that's exactly what happened. Antony giving the ball away on the edge of the box there is Antony things like we just described it. But what were United supposed to be doing in that moment? The whole idea is to close the game down. So I think always that when I see something that happened in a football match like that, where it's complete dysfunction again, yes, it's the players, but players don't actually make those choices to go in the box. They don't just jog forward and go, well, yeah, we just do what we want. They're being told what to do in those moments, because there's actually communication going. Did you see with Wolves? It was really funny when they made a substitution. Someone went up to Kilman and gave him a note, and he takes the note out. Did you see it? And he reads the note, and then he goes and does something, and he shoves it in his socks. And it's like that communication happens for the whole 90 minutes in football matches. It comes from the coaches. Yeah. You're not telling me United are saying there, oh, well, they shouldn't be, go score another goal. Like, there's no need to score. You've won the game. And then in that moment, in that horrific counter attack, United are all running back like idiots. And Neto just goes, right, I'm just going to put it through Varane's legs. And it's a goal in the corner. Not good enough, Scott, is it? Like that is for me a coaching choice at that moment of time where you're trying to close the game down, but then maybe that communication isn't good.
There's
enough.
also professional intelligence, Rob. These guys are these guys have been professional footballers in this situation, not in Kobbie's case and Garnacho's case, but for a decade. Rafa Varane's won a World Cup. Like, Johnny Evans has 15 years of Premier League experience. Like,
it's about professionalism. But are we saying that these players are not taking on instructions that final 5 minutes and they just going against what the coach is telling them? I don't believe that either. I don't believe that in that final few minutes that they were like, oh no, we'll do what we want. Like, I know it feels like that, but I don't believe it. I think all of that is controlled from the bench. And I think in that moment, you're bringing on your centre back. So just get the ball on the deck and play the clock and be boring and run it down into corner flags. United are just not very good at that. And I think that, again, maybe that is a communication issue from Ten Hag. Is that it wasn't outward either, Scott. It wasn't like he was telling him to sit and we could see that physically. He's bringing on players, but then they weren't actually doing the function. Like you just said there, Johnny Evans knows what he's doing. Johnny Evans doesn't want to be in the box in the 95th minute, does he? Like, they're clearly trying to score a goal, and that's the instruction. And you kind of think to yourself, well, you don't need to score a goal. Just kill the game. So you nearly got punished for it, but of course, Kobbie came up good. Kobbie saved you. And that's the kind of the cherry on the cake for the football match.
That's the most important thing for now. At least, totally. Like we could have spent all of our time what's the word? Being down on luck. I can't remember the word I was trying to say. But the picture changed when he did that. You know, and now you can get away with 3 points and you can go and review that game. West Ham are coming up on Sunday at Old Trafford. You can look at that and go, stop. Just don't stop being stupid.
But it's collective stupidity.
Positive. It is, yeah. It's
collective stupidity. And that's why I highlight the coaching side of it. It's because there's no doubt in that moment that you can actually like rejig your chessboard. That's what I called it last week. And just put your pieces in the right places and say, right, just keep the ball and do that, lads. But there wasn't that. It was still wild, wasn't it? And this bringing on someone like Antony to play his function in those moments. You know, Antony's not that kind of player either. Antony's a kind of forward-thinking, driving entity. He wants to go in that direction. Not particularly great at some of the more defensive functions on the deck.
Really?
You nearly blew it. What? No,
Really?
I think he wants to be.
The one good thing about Antony is that he works backwards.
No, I think he does the work going backwards and forwards, but you saw in the end of that game that he's living on the edge of the box. So it's like he's not sitting back there to kind of cut off a counter attack. He's not stood on Neto, which is what you would expect, wouldn't it? Like you're going to run with him, and what do they leave? They left Varane with Neto. That doesn't make sense, does it? Again, that's like a coaching faux pas, I think. So you bring on Antony because he gives you an extra bit of work rate, but he doesn't give you a lot of technicality on the deck. I really don't think he does. So horses for courses, at the end of the day with that, but. I think it was the right function. United were trying to do the right thing at the end there. They just still don't really know how to do it from the bench to the communication to the players. It nearly blew up in our faces, but thankfully, fingers crossed it didn't. And that's why we don't want to be negative. Like you won the game, and winning is really all that matters in that scenario.
And you got away with 3 points. You can hopefully look back at it and go, right, let's learn from it. Even though they've had plenty of chances to learn from it before, they've not been punished for it. Anyway, West Ham at the weekend, they need to start winning. West Ham, difficult team, but I think they only drew with Bournemouth last night. United need to just put on a run of, I say a run of wins, but if you beat West Ham, then you go to Aston Villa the week after. Great home form, but Newcastle just beat them. And then if you go to Aston Villa, you put in a good performance and you win, changes the entire complexion of the season. Changes the complexion.
Wins change everything, don't they? Win games, it solves everything. It's the best plaster to put on a cut always. And this is the thing. There's nothing, I think, Scott, even going towards the end of the season. Say if United even got top 4 this year and we came fourth, that would be miraculous from this position. But it still wouldn't mean that everything was fixed. Like it just means that you might be moving in the correct direction, and it's just a long process, isn't it? But I think United are 7th, aren't they? And there is a little bit of daylight there. Like you can look forward and actually say, right, these games are coming up, and you have to win them. But I think United are in that scenario now till the end of the season, just like certain other clubs are. I think you look at Chelsea, and Chelsea are in that position where if you don't win games, this manager might lose his job, and that might not be wholly Pochettino's fault, but that's where you are with results. I think United now, we need to see the intent, Scott. Like when I'm at Old Trafford for the West Ham for the West Ham game and at Old Trafford in future matches, I want to see the team have intent in what they do. And we've not seen that enough this season. We saw it last year for a bit. We didn't see it this year. And now we need to see it every single week. Because at least if you're professional and you're doing your work, Scott, you've got a chance. Like we're seeing United are attacking better. They're finding the striker better. I think Rashford's form's improving. We like what Garnacho's doing. Now you have to figure out the other bits. Can you keep Kobbie in the 8? I don't want to see him in the 6. Can you keep players fit? Did you see last night, Martinez? Big strapping on his leg. Did you see that at the end of the game? Big strapping.
Yeah, I didn't actually. I only saw a picture of it afterwards.
Yeah, and it's but icing his foot, so some swelling. So I don't think that's. I wasn't too worried about it because I think if it had been an injury, they would have been treating him in the dressing room. They wouldn't have been treating him on the bench. It's a bit of icing on the foot, nothing I think over the top. But you need to keep players fit now as well, don't you, Scott? And this is it now going into this next period. No European games to worry about. It's going to be just domestic stuff, and everyone just has to hit their marks week after week after week. And if you do that, then the pressure will definitely subside on Ten Hag. There'll be a lot less criticism on him, and he can maybe do his work a little bit more relaxed. He doesn't have to deal with things he's had to deal with in the last week or two. Again, off-pitch stuff that does affect on-field things for him. And you move forward. You get the victory, and I think he will actually be able to take that to the training ground and say, right, we did these things really well, lads. Carry on doing them. But then there's these little bits where we need to be a lot tighter. And he did say that after the game as well. He was like, I think he said the words, I have experienced players and they're kind of not showing their experience at times. And you think about that and you think, I think that's a really good way of surmising it because that's how it feels. It's like, come on,
What's
lads.
he talking about in that situation then?
I think he was just
the
talking
conversation about the corner.
I think he was talking more about game management in general. So, and he's talked about that in the past as well. And in the last few weeks, it's been obviously I haven't got players fit, so game management becomes difficult. But I think when you have experienced players, I'm talking here about like in the final moments, Bruno, Varane. I think you look at Luke Shaw to an extent. These are players that should go to their teammates, lads, ball on deck. 5-yard passes, slow it down. And they don't tend to. It tends to still be a little bit wild, like United are trying to fly forward in the 95th minute, and it's mad, isn't it? And then you have to go and score a goal to win the game. So I think that's what he was referring to, and that's I think what you were referring to as well. Is professionalism. Is that in those moments you have to take control sometimes and just say, right, let's kill the game. We're not very good at that. Maybe that's something we'll get better at as the season goes on.
West Ham on Sunday. We'll be back on, I think, Monday to talk about whatever happens there. Will you be there, Rob?
For which game?
West Ham.
Yes.
I'm at Arsenal, Liverpool. How enjoyable.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm sure you'll love that.
How exciting. I'll try and catch United, maybe on my phone. Anyway, final section of the show. The transfer window's closed. Man United have signed nobody. They ran out of money, and they have, I'm counting, let 13 players leave. One on a permanent transfer. I suppose one is the cancellation of a loan, Sergio Reguilon, and the rest. Two on permanent transfers here. One on deadline day, and then the rest are loan deals of youth players with options to buy. And the question is, why are United letting go so many of their youth players? Do you want to stab at it?
Look, I don't feel great about some of the players that have gone out the door, because I'm always thinking about squad development, and I think that young players, even when they don't play or if they're in the fringes, it's good to have them in house to work with your senior professionals. At the same time, some of these players do need football, so they need to go out. So that's also understandable. And I think the bigger picture is, Scott, is that, like you just said there, in terms of a number, you can almost officially call that a cull. Like that's a lot of pros to go out the door, whether they're young or old or whatever. Cancelling someone like Reguilon's contract, I think, shows a purpose, Scott, because you look at him and you go, he's not good enough, so just get him out the door. Like, let's cancel that one. I think when you look at some of the younger players, again, I think for me, it's more, say, someone like Hannibal. You know, we mentioned Hannibal last week with Sevilla. Sevilla released a press statement yesterday actually saying that it's all complete nonsense. The players training really well, and all the stuff in the press has been completely inaccurate. The manager made an adverse comment, and they said it's been taken out of context. And I think that the player's been suffered because of that. So there's a little bit of defense of
maybe
Hannibal.
There's a little bit of plastering over a mistake.
Of course, I think the manager's choosing of his words were wrong. Like, he was making out Hannibal was an issue, and I think Hannibal hasn't fallen out with the manager. It's just again bad wording. It happens, doesn't it? I think Ten Hag has been accused of that by myself very recently, of choosing bad words. But I think when you look at these players going out the door, Scott, it shouldn't really impact your ability to win or build. And if anything, it means you can get to the summer transfer window in a little bit more cleaner, healthier state, is that you're clearing up these squad spots to go out and buy players, maybe at the lower end of the transfer market. But you've also still got enough youngsters in behind the scenes where, like you see here yesterday, Forson coming on, got the assist for Kobbie. That's not been talked about. Like, he's the one who actually lays the ball off for Kobbie to make that space to be able to run through.
I think you're being nice.
It's an official assist, Scott. It's an official assist. That's what it is. So, like, it's not a Bruno assist from 60 yards, but it is still an assist. And I think the thing is that that's how you're going to have to use players now, is that some of the fringe, you need them to contribute somehow or the other, even if it is just a kind of dolly assists like that. You need them to get on the football pitch. And I'm okay with it. Like, I don't think we need to go too mad about, is Ten Hag invested in youth or not? I think Ten Hag and Man United need to be invested in winning. You need to go out there and find ways to win now. And I think chopping parts of the squad out, because you need that room when it comes to FFP, and you need it in terms of your wage structure, then it's smart to do it now, isn't it? These players are not going to feature for you in the next 6 months for whatever reason. That's what the manager's decided. Then move them now. Move them now so you can get into the summer and you can actually be a little bit more focused about how you're going to go and buy your next generation of talent.
That's it, innit? I think when the accusations of Ten Hag promoting youth are ridiculous. I think they're look at the two players. Look at Garnacho. He broke through.
Yeah.
Look at Kobbie. He broke through and scored a win. If you're good enough to play, Kobbie started is it 8 in a row or something, or played in the last 8? Like,
he's club captain you.
He's a future club captain. He really is. I thought that yesterday. But hey, if you're good enough, you're old enough. I think what these loan departures and permanent departures tell you of all these players is PSR FFP. We'll talk about that a bit more in a second. But B, like if you haven't shown enough, or if your path to the first team isn't there because there's established players in front of you that the manager depends on, then like that's it, And also, I'll just dig into this FFP PSR stuff. So profit and sustainability rules. I just did a video on 90 Min's channels coming out around this, which I recorded yesterday. United are one of the PSR rules have been in the Premier League for a decade-ish. Clubs are not allowed to lose over £105 million over the course of a 3-year period, right? Now, there's caveats with that. A lot of owners investing money will help that position, this kind of thing. But what we've seen for so long is erroneous spending from a lot of teams. Everton have been deducted 10 points. They could even get deducted more points. The reason why they got deducted 10 points in the first place was because their 3 years of accounts dating back to the year ending 2021-22, they made a loss of 124 million, which is over the allocated limit of 105 million. They dispute that, but they've been docked 10 points. Everton can now be docked more points along with Nottingham Forest because the years rolled over. That 2021-22 season is still in their accounts, along with 2022-23 and the year before, the middle year. And they've lost too much money in that period, or they might have lost too much money in that period as well. So then that will directly affect how many points you've got in the league. Forest are the same. They tried to sell Brennan Johnson to, I think it was Brentford, during the season. They ended up selling him after June 30th. To Spurs for more money, but because it wasn't in that allotted period of time, their loss was too great. So it counts on the books of the following season. So what you're seeing is when United are spending 80 million on Antony and 50 million on Onana, 60 million on Mount, and you're not selling players properly, which we know that they haven't been doing for so long, chances are, unless you're really successful and you're raking in money through Champions League revenues and this kind of thing, going deep into competitions, you're treading that line. And I think the fear is along United's lines and in the current 3-year period that they are treading a bit too close to the line. So they want to try and raise money or save money, cut back on money where they can. So it helps their position moving forward. Because this year could be potentially, if it's going to stay on their books for 3 years, it's going to be a difficult one to get off the books, which means they'll have to sell players. I'd imagine some players will be sold for big money if they can. But United are trying to simply balance the books out so it allows them for future investment to be a bit smarter and to avoid penalties. Arsenal, the same. Newcastle are the same. Top clubs in the Premier League all fear this. And the 10-point deduction at Everton and the following charges against Everton and Forest show that the rules have teeth and no clubs want to mess with it.
And I think that's a good thing. Like United are one of about 10 clubs that are in this position where over that period they have spent frivolously. Like you just talked about Nottingham Forest, Scott. I can remember off the top of my head, I think they're made since they came up about 58 signings. That's not a joke. They've made literally over 50 signings in that period. I think one transfer window they bought 23 players in or something in one summer. Like that's crazy because it's a lot of wages, isn't it? And that was for a promoted team coming up, trying to get itself established in the Premier League because you've got all of these riches because now you're in the top division, you're going to get all these windfalls. I think when you look at United, this is partly, again, why we're talking about the kids going out the doors because you're just trimming, you just trim till you can get somewhere where you're happier. You just said there, you mentioned Mason Mount again and the signings of that. And we talked about Antony and we talked about Onana earlier. If you're going to spend 200 million on, say, 3 players, you better hope that A, they play, and B, that they help you. And I think this is one of the reasons why United have let Hannibal out the door, is because that space is open for Mason Mount. So when Mason Mount is fit, you got to use him, haven't you? Like you paid him a lot of money and you gave Chelsea 60 million. So you can't then go down the line. So actually, I'm going to play Hannibal, who's on, a few grand a week, and this guy who's on tons of money is just going to sit on my bench. Mount is going to have to become a viable piece for Ten Hag in the next few weeks and months, and that starts with his fitness. But it also means, Scott, that when you get to the summer, you are going to be making these choices about some of these maybe failing talents at United, because you can't do what you would normally do and say, well, just give it another year, because as you get to that end of that year, you fail again, maybe, but then you are absolutely at the mercy of this kind of FFP rule. And it's been there for a long time, as you've just said. And teams are petrified of it. And Man United are definitely one of those teams. And I'm sure that Jim Ratcliffe, that's something as a businessman that he'll be trying to rectify in the earliest moments. He's like, if I want to put my money in this club, we need to sort the accounting out, and we need to be a lot tighter with that. And I think they will be. I think they'll get to summer, Scott. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is one or two pretty significant transfers from Man United, just because you're going to have to balance those books. And you have to find a way to create a squad in a more holistic manner. It's just as simple as that.
And why is it youth players that are leaving? Well, because they've tried to sell Harry Maguire and they couldn't.
Yeah.
Because they've tried to sell Scott McTominay and they couldn't. They tried to sell Jadon Sancho and they could only loan him out. Now, the reasons why they can't sell these players is because they're on bloody massive money. Not in McTominay's case, but he doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to join West Ham. Harry Maguire is on money that no other club would pay him.
No.
Simply put, no other club will pay Harry Maguire that money unless he moved to Saudi Arabia. Jadon Sancho, United are paying 2/3 of his wage.
Yeah,
because Dortmund can't afford.
Him.
They can't afford that.
I think Dortmund paying about 100 grand.
Erroneous. It's erroneous decision making. It's inflating. I think Antony's wage went from like 25k to 200. Was it or something? I
think it was 12 times. I remember at the time 12 times pay rise from what I actually paying him.
You do not need to do that. Stop being so silly.
It's frivolous.
United
isn't it?
Now having to undo all these mistakes that they're making, and the only real way that they can make a difference on the books currently, because they pay all these first team players too much money, is to let go some of the fringe players. If you can make 15 million on Hannibal, or if you can make 15 million on Alanga, you probably got to do it. For me,
completely. And I think the thing is that the reason why you let go 12 or 13 kids or the youngsters or the fringe is because that's maybe the equivalent to one or even just two like genuine first team players on big wages. Like you might get rid of 10, Scott, but that might only be like £200,000 a week, but £200,000 a week when we're talking about these FFP rules is huge. So like your choice there is, we can't sell Mason Mount tomorrow, even though he's not helping us. So we need to find a way to get him in the team. So what we have to do is make space by that, and then take these other wages off and kind of put them together like as a conglomerate. There's like 12 wages that go off the books that maybe is the equivalent of 2 first team players. So that's okay. I think that's part of the accounting of football. And if you're not going to use those players, and Ten Hag says, do you know what? Let's get Pellistri off the books because I just don't want him in my team. United fans will respond to that because they like Pellistri. We're going to see it now with someone like Ahmed, aren't we, in the weeks ahead? Are you going to use an Ahmed, or are you going to get to the end of the season and say, well, Ahmed actually cost us 30 million quid? Like, he costs money, and you could actually go to the open market tomorrow and maybe get that 30 million back from say, if Sunderland got promoted or something like that, when they're looking to bring back, make a big signing and a big splash. Someone might spend 20 to 30 million, but this is not actually about transfer fees, Scott. This is about in-house wage structures and being able to have sustainability. And yeah, you'll sell a player now and then where you'll make some money, but you're probably going to make losses on most of the players that go out the door, like you just said there about McTominay. And, they wanted 50 million from McTominay.
They will make a loss on McTominay.
Like, you look at these players that are kind of touted to leave, and they're all leaving because at one point or the other they were failing. Like, players that have done well tend not to be in these conversations, do they? So there's probably too many at Man United that have not done well enough. And I do think that at the end of the season, Onana, Antony, and Mount, last one's in, first one's out. That's quite often how it works.
I think you're being a bit unfair on Mount.
I'm not being unfair. I thought Mason Mount was a good signing, and I want to be proved right about that. But at the same time, I don't feel good about it because his fitness is really poor. So he's been training for a while now at Carrington and supposedly been available already, and he's still not really fully available. It feels a little bit like Varane, but when
you don't want to bring him back and risk him going.
Of course you don't. Of course you don't, but you're going to get to a point where you will need him. And this is what I'm saying, is that you've decided that you're not going to stick with the Hannibals, the Pellistris, and these types of players who have padded your squad out. And I think done okay from the bench. You're actually going to be using the Mounts of this world, but he's a £60 million signing. and he earns a ton of money every week, 200 grand a week. So you've got to find a way to make him productive. And I think at the end of the season, Scott, especially if there is a change of manager, and I'm not trying to manifest that, I really am not. I think you might look at the players that have come in the last year or two, and they might be the first ones out the door. And it's not a Rashford, it's not a Bruno, it's not like more established players that you're looking at initially to move out the door. It will be the ones that have failed in the last 12 months.
Right, we've been going too long, so we'll wrap it up there. United 3 points against Wolves, hopefully 3 more against West Ham, but obviously that will be a challenge for them.
Fingers crossed.
But if they do get it, it changes the conversation a bit. I think they got a week off after that. And then you go to Villa, which is a tough game. But that record is not invincible anymore. Newcastle went and just beat them there.
Hammered them.
They really did. So,
yeah,
you have a week or so to prepare. If you can keep your first team together, hopefully things improve. And we'll see where we are. But
West Ham are not in a great moment, and you are better than them. You've got more talent than them. Go and beat them. Like, there's no excuses now. You've got your players available. You're at Old Trafford. Go beat this team. Move on to Villa Park and go and take Villa on, because Villa themselves are in now a bad moment, and you need to take advantage of that. And that's something, again, United need to get better at, is to take advantage of these situations when they fall in our favour.
Subscribe wherever you get your pods and watch us on YouTube. The Promised Land of Man United podcast, notification bell, hit that, like the video, subscribe, leave a comment as well, so you never miss a show. Hit that notification bell, do everything I just said. Follow us on social as well, at @Scott Saunders, at _Rob_B, and at TPL MUFC for the show as well. We'll be back on Monday, I think. Monday, yes. It is the day after the West Ham game. Hopefully we'll talk about another win and less brainless activity in the final 25 minutes. Maybe, hopefully, no brainless activity, and just hopefully a smooth 3 points. We never get them nowadays. Anyway, from Scott and Rob, it's Kobbie Mania. Until next time, see you soon.